Yeah, is that okay? Thank you, Alaska and Corla. Here's what we know. Since before COVID-19 arrived in Ireland, people with disabilities experience higher rates of discrimination than people without disabilities. The discrimination is more likely to occur and be more serious. People with disabilities are more than 3 times as likely to experience poverty and deprivation than people who don't. Ireland has the lowest employment rate for people with disabilities in the EU, and people with disabilities are less likely to attend further education. An estimated 1,300 plus people with disabilities under 65 are being inappropriately accommodated in nursing homes. I say estimated because the HSE haven't been able to provide me with the actual figures yet. It took Ireland over 10 years to ratify the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and the government still hasn't ratified the optional protocol. Carers and voluntary organisations do incredible work out of love and dedication and receive very little assistance for filling a gap that the state should have and can fill. Disability health and support services were already underfunded and were due to be cut by a further 20 million earlier this year by the then government. I could go on. The work of bodies such as the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission, Inclusion Ireland and the Disability Federation of Ireland let us all know how disgracefully people with disabilities and their family are treated by the state. It's fair to say that the group most profoundly affected by the pandemic is people with disabilities. That is on top of all the already existing issues that I mentioned, and now COVID-19 and the government's response has added considerably more challenges. Day services have been closed for months, in many cases are still closed, leading to regression, isolation and distress for people, as well as additional hardship and lack of respite for their family and carers. In other sectors, contacts between services and people moved online in some cases. However, Inclusion Ireland research shows that many people with disabilities can't use or do not have access to IT equipment. There are increased rates of anxiety and loneliness. The nearly 3,000 people with disabilities residing in settings of 10 or more people have been put at unnecessary risk by the state during the pandemic due to their living arrangements. School and college students with disabilities have additional needs that were not adequately addressed by these online systems. Many people with disabilities who work in hospitality and other industries either lost their jobs or can't attend due to health concerns, which affects not only their income, but their independence and their personal dignity. Disability services staff, medical therapists and dentists are among those who have been redeployed to contact tracing, which has seriously affected the capacity of the state to provide essential services. Furthermore, for workers in this sector, the inequalities between Section 39 and 38 organisations has been highlighted, with Section 38 employees being eligible for COVID sick pay, but Section 39 employees were not. This is the cumulative reality for people with disabilities in Ireland. Before COVID, people faced massive hurdles which have been magnified during this pandemic. Our challenge and our job is to immediately respond to these issues. This sector needs the resources to ensure a range of support to enable everybody to live dignified and independent lives. The impact of COVID continues to resonate for people with disabilities, and here's just a snapshot of issues that I've been contacted about in the past week. A young man who can't access speech and language therapy in West Cork has to travel almost 2 hours to the city, including stops because he can't be in a confined space for too long, to get 30 minutes of vital therapy. People in West Cork need to be able to access therapeutic services locally. It's completely unreasonable and, to be honest, outrageous to expect people to travel 2 hours for 30 minutes with a speech and language therapist. An occupational therapist highlighted the chronic lack of hoists and other supports without depending on the physical strength of family members and carers, which in any case isn't advisable. As a result, a family unable to travel more than 20 minutes from home due to toiletry needs. With easing of restrictions during the summer, the rest of us could travel around, but families like this one remained in a de facto lockdown. While the addition of outdoor dining has saved many small cafes and restaurants, a lack of consideration for people with disabilities and mobility with visual impairments has resulted in new and additional barriers. A woman with visual impairment contacted me to highlight this issue, as it creates uncertainty and it does erode dependence. In towns like Bandon, seating has been put on reclaimed street space, so it leaves the footpaths free, which is great. But these matters were highlighted during Make a Way Day 2 weeks ago. And I think any actions from national or local government need to be implemented through that disability lens to ensure basic mistakes don't arise, like pavements. There are countless other examples I could give from across West Cork and beyond from people who've contacted me since being elected. The common thread in all of these stories is a state that's unwilling to accept its responsibility to address the needs of all citizens and residents. The motion rightly calls for funding to fully reopen day and other essential disability services and to guarantee sustainable capacity within disability and dementia services. This responds to calls from people with disabilities. They are the experts and we have to listen to them. The government prioritised the opening of schools and colleges and roadmaps and living with COVID documents. It needs to do the same for people with disabilities. We need healthcare services locally at the point of need, therapeutic support in schools and training centres, vastly improved accessibility in transport and towns, and to see an immediate move from congregated settings to community-based housing. We also need to properly pay medical staff and support, including carers, and provide employment opportunities for people in all communities. Funding is central here. The state outsources its responsibility to charitable organisations and the goodwill of communities. However, the weakness of this model has come to the fore since fundraising capacities have literally collapsed. With an average loss of 40% in income for members of Disability Federation Ireland, these losses are even more significant for small to medium community-based disability organisations that rely so heavily on fundraising when they should be able to rely on the state. These organisations need those funds matched, at the very least, to maintain services. They need even more to be able to operate under COVID protocols and to develop innovative approaches to providing services. For example, Coaction in West Cork, a support service for children and adults with intellectual disability and or autism, needs money to recruit, retain and fully pay its staff. The government will need to invest in Coaction and other smaller organisations to cover the full costs of the COVID expenditure in disability services. An issue I've raised before and will continue to raise is the shameful lack of appropriate housing. Article 19 of the Convention on Rights of Persons with Disability guarantees the right to live independently in the community with a range of in-home residential and other community support services rather than in institutions. Successive governments have failed to ensure the provision of this. In West Cork, it's particularly impossible to access independent supported living. Ordinarily, this is a breach of people's rights, but during COVID, this puts people, some of whom have underlying medical complications, at greater risk as well. This is not a symptom of the pandemic, but of poor policy decisions and priorities over decades. As Dr. Frank Connaughty of the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission outlined to me in the Special COVID Committee on the COVID-19 response back in July, it is not the pandemic that has caused this, but the pandemic is giving rise to greater risk for people in these congregated settings. The fractures in the policy architecture we now see this pandemic showing up have always been there, but it is clearly within our gift to address and correct them. The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability is the means by which many of these issues can be addressed, and I look forward to working with many of you on the Committee on Disability Matters when it's formed. A rights-based approach is absolutely essential. However, in the meantime, the government has to commit to providing the funding and resources necessary to support people with disabilities and their families in living with COVID and with dignity. Almost 70 TDs from across the opposition benches are behind this motion. I'd like to thank Sinn Féin for enabling us to do this. TDs from across the political spectrum may not agree on many things, but we're all united on this. And I find it very hard to believe that the 80 plus TDs in government don't agree with us. People with disabilities and their families deserve more. They're also entitled to more. It's their right, and it is right the government must fulfil. The pandemic has been very hard on everyone. It has brought suffering and loss, unemployment and upset, but a disproportionate burden has been placed on people with disabilities, and it's essential we do everything we can to lighten that burden. Thank you.
Moving back now again to the Minister.